Hack123 says, just found your channel and been binging your videos. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. Hey, thank you, I appreciate it. It would be great if you could do a video for older grapplers and how to manage expectation against younger ones. I'm seeing so many young white belts training every day and getting good after a year. Essentially, the question is how to manage expectations as an older grappler in Jiu-Jitsu. This is a really common question I get, actually, funny enough, and I think it's because there's just lots of older grapplers now, which is really, really awesome. Jiu-Jitsu is growing so much, so there's lots of older guys. Also, before I get to the question, guys, if you guys have any questions, I take the best questions and I answer them here on YouTube. Drop them in the comments below. Be as specific as possible, and the more specific, the better, and the more specific, the more chances that I actually answer it. I have a couple notes, as I always do, right? And I wanted to give you guys a good, well thought out answer about this. Being an older grappler can be an intimidating thing, especially because unlike in wrestling, you don't really have old guys, right? Like, you have guys who are seniors in high school, or sorry, seniors in college, or you have guys they're on the freestyle circuit where they're a little bit older, but you don't have like 45-year-olds still wrestling. If you do, there's like one guy really in the country, you know? Coming to Jiu-Jitsu, I was able to kind of experience this. I've been doing Jiu-Jitsu for 4 years. When I think about this video, or when I think about this question, I try to be empathetic, right? Because I'm 26 going on 27 years old, right? I can't speak for older grapplers. I'm not an older grappler myself, so I'm gonna try to be empathetic and kind of relate to you guys what I've seen from guys who are getting a little bit older, like Chewy, my coach, and then other guys who are just complete hobbyists, right? So number one, regardless of your age, comparison does not help. Really, what does it help to go look at little Bobby, who's 21 years old? He's a white belt. He played football in high school. Meant that he's young, he's gonna be athletic, he's gonna recover way, way better than you. Yes, he's gonna have, all he needs is a flying knee cut and a top spin, and he's probably gonna beat you up. It's the reality of it. You might be a blue belt, he's a white belt, but him just being athletic and young is going to be a really big advantage. So what good does it do to compare yourself to a 21-year-old, white belt who just came off of the sports? Even, let's say the guy's not even athletic, just a 21-year-old, even if he's a little 21-year-old nerd, he's just naturally going to have more energy, the ability to recover faster, and honestly, sometimes the ability to pick stuff up a lot quicker than lots of older people do. I'm sure one of you guys here is a scientist. There's a lot of you guys here now on the channel, which I really appreciate, but I'm pretty sure that you guys can talk about what's like neuroplasticity, I don't know the words, right? But the younger you are, the easier it is for you to pick new things up and new skills up. Obviously, there are exceptions, but there's a huge advantage to just being young. Try not to compare yourself to the young white belt, right? Let's say you're a white belt, they're a white belt. Try not to compare yourself to the guy, because obviously in a year, that guy, just because of his age, is going to be able to train more, probably pick up more, and he's probably going to have a lot more free time than you. What I'm guessing is a middle-aged adult, or a middle-aged or really older adult who has a lot more responsibilities and time on their hands, or a lot less time on their hands. And that brings me to the next point. Do the best you can. Show up when you can. Again, you didn't say your specific age. I would have loved to know that, but assuming you're in your 40s, 50s, you probably have a house, you probably have kids, you probably have like a couple cars you're paying for, you have a lot of responsibilities, who knows what else you have. You got to do what you can. Depending on what your goals are, which we'll talk about in a second, you got to try to maximize your training. If you can only train once a week, you should be maximizing it. My number one piece of advice is don't do a bunch of full rounds, right? Try to constrain your training and live rounds. If you're going with this young guy, be like, hey bro, why are we doing full rounds? Instead, let's do some mount rounds. I get on bottom mount. If I escape, now we switch. I take your back. If I escape, we switch, etc., etc. I think it's important that if you can only train very little, which assuming the age, depending on like what your job is, I'd assume you don't have that much time to train. I would kind of shy away from all of the full rounds, all the crazy full rounds, and instead, especially when you're going with these younger guys, try to do these very specific situational rounds. You're gonna get so much out of it. You're gonna get so much better, so much faster. And you can, I'd say situational rounds, although this is an absolute, situational rounds help kind of deter the level of separation based on attributes. Meaning, if someone's a lot more athletic than you, that doesn't mean they're gonna do that well, that much better in a background, versus if we're starting an open round, they're probably going to be able to take you down. They're probably going to be able to pass you. All these things probably not even based off technique, but rather youth and speed. That's what I would say. I would say you can try to manage your training and try to manage the quality of your training with stuff like situational rounds. And then, of course, there's always this, just train more. obviously just try to train more, whatever that means for you. If you're only training once a week, maybe train twice a week. The next thing is don't push yourself to sickness and injuries. We're trying to manage the expectations. One of the worst things that you can possibly do is compare yourself so much to these younger guys that you're pushing yourself too much, right? I said maximize your training, so maybe do 2 times a week instead of 1, but obviously I'm not a doctor. Listen to your body. Do as much training as you can up until the point that it's starting to make you sick or get hurt. I used to train jiu-jitsu twice a day. I no longer do that. I train once a day. If I train twice a day, it's crazy. It's basically Hanukkah. It's special. It's random. I don't usually do it. Manage expectations, yes. Maximize your training, yes. And then once you do maximize your training, you found out like what's the right amount of training for you. Don't overdo that, because I know you want to get better. I know you have very specific goals, I'm sure, but doing too much, trying to be like the younger guys, is just going to get you hurt or sick, which both of those suck, because when you get hurt or when you get sick, you're forced to take a lot of time off. Now, last part, because this wasn't a very specific message, so I'm sorry I didn't dive into more specifics. Identify your goals. Measure your progress as it relates to those goals. I don't know what your goals are. Maybe you want a belt. Maybe you want to compete. Who knows what it is? I really don't know what it is, but in order to kind of measure progress, you have to have set goals, right? I can't say, if you go to a science class, right, you're gonna get a report card at the end of the year, and in order to get an A, you have these little goals, these little things that you have to mark off on your way to getting that A. But a lot of us, we do jiu-jitsu and we say we want to get better, but then that's extremely vague. What does that mean to get better? It's too vague. It doesn't make any sense. Now, if you have a goal, I want to train twice a week instead of once a week, that's a goal. I can check that off for 6 weeks, and if I see that, okay, now I can actually measure my progress. Maybe in those 6 weeks, 2 of the 6 weeks, I only trained once. Okay, I was a little bit off. Now I have basically a B from my goal, right? If I'm doing a progress report on myself, I want to get a stripe in a year. I don't know how stripes work because Chewy doesn't really do them. For me, at least, whatever that takes, it's like, are you showing up? Are you doing the things you need to do? I want to get really good at escaping the mount or escaping the back. Okay, again, have you been doing mount rounds a couple times a week, or even better, every day? I know this one doesn't necessarily relate particularly to your age, but in order for you to know if you're getting better, it can be really hard when you're comparing yourself to others. So creating some solid, specific goals is one of the things that I think is the most important, and I think it's great, because then you're not going through the motions. You're not just showing up, the worst advice ever, and you're being very specific, and you can measure it. You can be like, I did this times this over this amount of time, and by the end of that periodization, I like periodization, maybe 6 weeks, right? You're gonna literally feel better. You're gonna feel more confident, because you're like, oh, okay, I did the stuff that I said I was gonna do. Anyways, that's my answer. Don't compare yourself to young guys. Set specific goals. Make sure that you train, you maximize your training, but minimize the intensity so you're not actually killing yourself. Do some situational rounds and have fun, because at the end of the day, this is just a hobby for all of us, even me. It's just a hobby. If you guys would like to learn anything from me, I have a ton of instructionals, a ton of takedowns for jiu-jitsu instructionals that you can get at BrandonReed3x.com/store, or you can look up Wrestling for Dummies on Patreon, where you can start my free trial. On my Patreon, I pretty much just post a bunch of seminar Q&As and full seminar techniques. So this week, I just did a seminar here in Kentucky, and we did a lot of overtie stuff. So overtie snaps, overtie slide bys, overtie snatch shingles. And part 1 of that came out yesterday. Part 2 comes out next week. You guys can check the links down below, or check the link, I believe it's going to be up here, if you guys are interested in learning from that. Anyways, no worries if you don't want to. Talk to you guys next time.